Tonight on Insight, when you've grown up not knowing them, what's it like to meet your family later in life? Jamie, you've just flown back from the US after meeting your birth mother and siblings there. What was it like?
Yeah, it was brilliant.
I had absolutely no idea that the father I grew up with was not my biological father.
Our father had been a love child, so it was kind of like two secrets coming into this family.
She told me that my biological father was a womaniser, he was off with other women, and that she gave me up to spite him.
The only way for me to reconcile what had happened was to kind of hate my birth parents.
Well, as soon as I saw him, I knew he had the same features as me. He sort of acted like me, like an idiot sometimes.
Always grew up wondering who and where they are, and I never gave up hope that I'd one day find them. In 1975 I was adopted from Vietnam at the end of the war due to being mixed race. I'm Jamie Fry, I'm 51 and I've just flown from Adelaide, South Australia to meet my birth mother and siblings in Georgia, USA for the first time. Yeah, it's pretty excited, probably not quite apprehensive, but yeah, very excited to be able to meet them all finally. We're here.
Hi, brother. Hi.
Hi, Jamie.
How are you?
Good.
How are you?
Good.
Are you, Mom?
How are you?
Jimmy?
You alright? You okay? Hey. Right, I'm here now. Alright? Alright? Alright.
How are
Get
you?
to know each other. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really happy.
First time I hugged Mum, I could feel a lot of mixed emotion in her. Alright.
Thì mai nhớ nó, mai thương nó, là nhớ nói gì đó, chứ không biết nói gì giờ.
You alright? How are you feeling?
I feel good, but I just had no. I see you.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
I see
We're
you.
here, right? We're here now. Okay?
Yeah.
Cheers, our first drink together.
Yeah.
Go. Growing up in Australia, Asian food, you know, it was the type of things we'd go out and like Dad will put tomato sauce on everything. Very good, Mum. Very good. So having a family meal with Mum and my brother and sister today was great. So this is probably the earliest photo of me in Australia. Remember me there? Mm-hmm. That face? And then this is me getting a little bit older. Yeah? I think there is still a sense of guilt with Mum. She hopes that I don't hold anything against her, which of course I don't. Being a single female with a mixed race child back during the war, things would have been tough.
Không có cực gì, nhưng mà lúc đó mình không có má làm cho Mỹ, nhưng bây giờ là Mỹ rút quân hết, Mỹ đi hết, không có công ăn việc làm và nuôi.
I'm just happy that we found each other and we can have a long life together.
Nó vui, có gia đình này kia nọ, nó vui, có gia đình, có việc làm ở bên Úc nó đỡ hơn. Nếu nó ở Việt Nam nó sẽ khổ.
This reunion is probably a bit of closure. It's opening a new book, so got a long time together moving forward.
Thank you so much for being here. Jamie, you've just flown back from the US after meeting your birth mother and siblings there. What was it like?
Yeah, it was brilliant, and yeah, it's something I've dreamt of all my life. So I've got to know them over the years, but the actual face-to-face and being able to give them a hug and all of those things were absolutely brilliant.
Jamie, you grew up knowing you were adopted. When did you start thinking about searching for your birth family?
It would have been in my early 20s when my adoptive parents gave me paperwork from my orphanage, and so I started on the journey.
You started then travelling back to Vietnam, knowing only the name of the orphanage that you were in, and that your birth father was in the US military. What did you discover about your birth mother?
They had told me that my birth mother had passed away, and which didn't feel quite right.
You then started doing DNA searches with other adoptees from Vietnam. Did that lead to anything?
Yes, it led to a reasonably close relative from my father's side. And he was an African-American soldier, family from Arkansas in the deep south on the Louisiana border. So I went to the US a couple of times to meet that family.
You got a breakthrough in the search for your mother. When did that happen?
A couple of weeks before COVID, I had a half-brother DNA match, and I contacted the administrator, and then COVID came.
Daryl, when did you find out that you were adopted?
I think I was around 14 years old. I was watching a TV program, matinee movie, and little Johnny was adopted. And it wasn't the first time I'd asked my parents whether I was adopted, but I went in again and say, hey, I'm not adopted, am I? And this time, Mum started crying and ran away, and they had an argument when they never really had a fight. And so then I thought, oh, OK, fine. It wasn't until the night time that Mum came in with a piece of paper, which was, I think, my adoption order or something like that, and it had my original name in there. Wow. And that was the way they told me.
How did you deal with that news that you were adopted?
Initially, I couldn't believe it. I thought, you know, who are these people that have been lying to me all my life? So I had to decide what I was going to do, and I thought, well, the only way for me to reconcile what had happened was to kind of hate my birth parents.
Right.
Because they gave me up. It's the only way I could cope at that time.
Were there differences between you and your family that made you suspect you might be adopted?
Yeah, well, I've got quite white skin, and they could tan very easily. I would burn. So that was the first thing. I didn't sort of feel like I fitted in. The next thing I think was I didn't really think like them. You know, they were kind of blown by the wind in what they did and where they moved and lived. And I always thought that I'd want to take control of my life. Even as a child, I thought, well, that doesn't kind of make sense. I didn't know why. Like, I didn't have the same features as them, or even my extended family. I didn't look like any of them. So, yeah, I suppose I suspected from a pretty young age.
When did you start looking for your birth family?
Well, I think it was after Dad died when I was around 22, but laws didn't let you do that. You know, in those days, they wouldn't give you any information about your own identity. It wasn't until about 28 years old that the laws changed and you could actually find out, well, kind of who your mother was. So eventually that took a couple of years to do that, and then eventually I found, I suppose around 28 or 29 years old, I actually found my birth family.
You got hold of your birth certificate, which had your original name on it. What was your name?
It was Shane Allen Wallace.
What was it like to see that name on a piece of paper?
Initially it was a shock, but after a while I got to embrace the idea.
You knew your birth mother's name was Beverly. What did you discover about her?
Well, I unfortunately found out she died. Beverly had married this guy called Alan, spelt Allen, A-L-L-E-N, the same way my birth name was, which is usually a surname, not a first name. So I sort of put two and two together and thought that was a message. But yeah, my girlfriend at the time, we had a phone number. We rang that number. That was where Beverly used to live. And her mother, Dorothy, was there and answered the phone and said that she'd passed away.
You then got the phone number of your birth father, Alan, and called him. What happened?
I thought, well, you know, the next step is to contact this man and ask him whether he's my father, which is what I did. And I said, oh, you know, I want to talk to you about Beverly, and there was a bit of kind of eerie silence and on the end of the phone, and then I said, oh, you know, by the way, are you my father? And he goes, yeah, I reckon I would be.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was, from then on, that was the path forward.
Wow. Karon, you began looking for your birth family in your 30s. What did you discover about your birth?
I discovered that I had been found abandoned by Sister Odell, who was an infant baby nurse, opening up the baby health centre at 8:55 on a Monday morning, and she thought I was the male because I was only 1 pound 3 ounces, and yeah, that's how it all began for me.
So you were on the doorstep of a baby
On the doorstep,
centre?
yes. I whimpered as she approached, and that's how she knew I wasn't a litter.
What happened to you as an abandoned baby after that?
Well, I was taken to the hospital and declared that I was 8 weeks premature, so I went into a Humi crib and the police were called, and so the police started to do an investigation. The local newspaper was called and I made the front page the following day and again on Friday, asking for people, did they know anything, you know, come forward, it's okay. And then I was declared in court destitute and neglect, and so I was made a ward of the state. And so soon I was healthy enough, I was transferred from Denilican to a baby orphanage in Sydney for possible adoption.
At 32, you asked the New South Wales Authority for information about your early years. What did you find out?
I got to read the statement of the nurse who found me and how I ended up in Sydney, and I think that the country was scared that someone would adopt me that was close to whoever my biological parents were. So I think it was that, let's sneak her off to Sydney and find her some lodgings up there.
You found 28 family members through a DNA website, then used a genealogist. What was uncovered?
That led me to my father's side of the family.
And who did you find there?
Well, I found out that I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. This genealogist approached my second cousin, who then rang up what would be my half-sister, and they'd only found her as well because our father had been a love child, and so he had a different last name. They didn't know about him, so it was kind of like two secrets coming into this family. I had a half-sister. She rang me. I want to do the test. She did the test, and it came back that we were half-sisters.
And what did they tell you about your father?
They told me, unfortunately, that I found them in May, spoke to them in June, and he'd passed away in February that same year.
Just missed that?
Just missed it, yeah.
Amy, 3 years ago, you got a letter. What did it say?
I received a letter from a Victorian government agency that they had some information about my birth details that they would like to share with me, and that I needed to call a number to find out more information. When I rang them, they told me that my parents had used a sperm donor to conceive me in the 70s, and that the father I'd grown up with was not my biological father. They also told me that the reason I was receiving the letter was that my biological father was trying to make contact with me.
How did you feel when you heard all this?
It was a huge shock for me. I had absolutely no idea that something like that could happen to someone at the age of 40 years. But at the same time, I was intrigued and kind of excited to find out more about this bonus family that it appeared I'd just kind of find out more information about.
Growing up, did you ever have any idea that this was how you were conceived?
I had absolutely no idea that the father I grew up with was not my biological father. I grew up in a really loving family with loving parents, and I'm still very close to my mum and dad. I just had no reason at all to wonder about it until I got this letter.
You were told the donor wanted to meet you. His name was Sig. What was in the letter?
It was an incredibly emotional letter for me to read, and I burst into tears as I read it. It described his life, it described his hobbies and interests, and it was as if I was reading about my life. It was as if he was describing my life.
You were also told that you had a half-brother and a half-sister. What was it like to learn that?
They were born in the exact same year that I was born in. So I went from not not knowing anything about this side of my family to having a biological father and a brother and a sister all in one go. That was incredibly overwhelming, so many emotions to try and deal with that, and they were all wanting to start a relationship with me and wanting to find out more about me and to link with me and to connect with me, and it was fantastic and amazing, but also very overwhelming and emotional to find out all that news all in one go.
You'd been talking to your donor Sig and your half-siblings online and then decided to meet your half-siblings. What was it like to meet up face-to-face?
I met Sig and my siblings within a few weeks of each other. It's really difficult to describe. To meet people you're biologically related to for the first time later in life, I felt an instant connection to them. I could feel, when I'm with Sig, I felt a really strong connection to him. And when I was with Luke and Elena, I just felt really accepted, and we feel like we can sit down and talk forever and not have any issues or problems.
Carol, you fell pregnant when you were 21.
Right.
What was the situation like with the baby's father?
I was engaged to a fellow who had lost his wife and had a son of 4 years of age when I found out I was pregnant and went to ring him. That was not true. His wife was well and truly alive, so that was a huge shock.
You went to a Sydney hospital which had a section for unmarried mothers.
That's correct.
What did they advise you to do?
In the 60s, obviously, there was no support whatsoever, and in fact, if you're a single woman with a child, you're ostracised. It was very difficult. So they talked about adoption, and I thought, well, I really had no other choice. And so I just prayed that the baby would go to a good home.
How long after you gave birth did you have to hand your baby girl over?
She was 10 days old, and I saw her through glass in the nursery, and it was heartbreaking.
Did you give her a name?
Yes, I called her Alison Ruth.
Carol, what was it like for you after you gave her away?
Dreadful. I went through a period of depression. I'd look for babies in the street and think, was that her? Who had her? And at that time, or down the track, Anita Kobe, people might remember, was murdered, and I used to think, I wonder if that's my daughter, because the age seemed to fit. I went through a struggle with that for ages.
25 years after you said goodbye to your daughter, you got a letter in the mail. Yes. Did you read it straight away?
I came home from work and there was a letter from the Benevolent Society, and my husband just said, there's a letter there. So I opened it up and read it. He said, oh, what's that about? And I said, oh, they're asking for a donation, because when I read it, the letter said, asking you about an event that happened in April 1967. And I knew straight away, and I sort of panicked, and I thought, I've got to get away. So I said to my husband, oh, we need milk. I better go up to the shop. So I went up to the shop and sat in the car and cried, reread the letter a few times. And when I eventually got home, he said, you're a long time. And I had to sort of lie and say, oh, I ran into somebody and got chatting.
Because your husband didn't know?
Because my husband didn't know. And so the next morning, I went into work early, and then at 8:30 in the morning I rang the number, which was a social worker at Crown Street Hospital.
You then received a second letter, this time from your birth daughter, Annette, your Carol's birth daughter. Would you mind reading some of that letter that you wrote to Carol? Thank you.
I'd be delighted.
Thank you.
So this is July 1992. Dear Carol, I've been thinking for some time how to compile the perfect letter to you. It's not easy to know where to begin, so here goes. My name is Annette, I'm 25 years old and I'm quite tall, with red hair, fair skin and freckles. I had a very happy and normal, trouble-free childhood. I was well behaved and I did well at school. I grew up knowing I was adopted. I can't remember ever being told, so I must have been very young. We openly discussed adoption at home and it was never a taboo subject or considered something to be ashamed of. In fact, I always felt special and I felt proud that it was something extra that I had. I have grown up believing that my birth mother was a very special woman who must have loved me very much to make such a huge sacrifice. I truly hope my search for you is a pleasant surprise and not a horrible one.
Why did you want to find your birth mum?
There were two main reasons. One, I was extremely curious. Where did I get the red hair from? And my height. My parents looked nothing like me, and what was the story behind my birth? And the other reason was I thought, if nothing else, I would really like my birth mother to know that I had a happy, loving childhood. And if she'd been wondering about me over those 25 years, at least she might get some comfort to know that I'm alive and well and I've had a good life.
Within a fortnight of writing that letter to Carol, you arranged to meet up. What was that like?
Scary. I was extremely nervous. The night before I didn't sleep. When we met, though, it was an incredibly emotional experience. It was tears of joy and of sadness, of what perhaps could have been. But I think the other thing was I just stared and stared and stared and I was desperately looking for similarities.
You continued to meet up. What was the relationship like in those early days?
Complete obsession. We spoke every day, extreme highs. It was like falling in love for the first time. It was this great big honeymoon.
How long did the honeymoon phase last?
So a good 6 months of the obsession and probably a good 18 months to get some degree of normality back.
Carol, you didn't have any other children.
No.
What was it like to suddenly be a mother 25 years after you last saw your baby?
Unbelievable. Words can't describe the emotion. And like Annette said, you know, she was an obsession to me too.
Annette, it's been 30 years since you met Carol. What's the relationship like now?
We have a really good relationship and no doubt a special bond. It hasn't always been easy. Sometimes I've felt the weight of expectation and pressure.
On what level?
I don't think Carol can ever get enough time with me, and no amount of time is ever quite enough. And so sometimes, you know, I need to just sort of take a deep breath and step back a bit.
Were there particular times it was really challenging?
I was going through a really intense personal crisis after I'd known Carol for about 2 years, and I really had to say, sorry, I've just got to have a break for a couple of months.
How did Carol react when you said you needed that time apart?
I think she felt that it was a personal rejection, and it actually wasn't. I just needed space and a bit of time to regroup and get this other stuff sorted out so I could resume my life.
Carol, what have those situations been like for you?
Yeah, at times difficult, but I feel that no family goes through any situation that everything's smooth sailing. There's often hiccups along the road.
Have you ever been called mum?
No, I don't know. No, I don't think so, and I certainly don't expect that. No, I'll never be her mum, that's for sure.
Daryl, you tracked down your birth family when you were 30. What was said at that first meeting?
I had arranged to meet my father, his wife Sue, and my sister Catherine for the first time in a hotel. And so I met them and we went up to the room and I sat on the end of the bed and they sat opposite, you know, all three of them. And Catherine was all smiles and they'd point out, oh, that's Joel, that's Conrad. Like the way I was talking, the way I was moving.
Oh.
As I moved my hands, they'd say, oh, look, that's Conrad. Or the back of my hands look like Alan's as well. So these are things that I'd never experienced in my life, growing up an only child.
So Joel and Conrad were...
My brothers, my
your full biological
blood brothers, yeah.
You grew up an only child and now you have 3 siblings. What was it like to learn that?
The idea of connection, I hadn't really had that connection. So when I finally discovered, it was a bit daunting, and I didn't really know, like I say, what the next step would be. But I knew that it was a good thing.
All your family are here tonight except your birth mother who passed away. Alan, you're Daryl's birth father. What was it like seeing him for the first time?
Well, we're both nervous, I think. And well, as soon as I saw him, I knew he had the same features as me. And he looked like me. And he sort of acted like me, like an idiot sometimes.
Catherine, you're Daryl's half-sister and you were 16 at the time of that first meeting. What was it like for you?
I was really excited because I already had 2 wonderful brothers that I'd grown up with and loved, and I was just adding another one. So I was really excited, and it was uncanny. I knew he was my brother. Absolutely, without a doubt.
Joel, you're Daryl's youngest brother and you grew up not knowing he existed. Was there an instant connection when you met him?
Firstly, let me say it's a very personable and difficult subject to talk about it. When I first learned of Daryl, I was 19. It brought out a lot of emotions, of course, a lot of questions. How could this happen? Why did this happen? And it wasn't love at first sight, of course. But the similarities came, and he's definitely a Nelson. He's definitely one of us. Good or bad, he's definitely one of us.
Conrad, was it the same for you?
Well, I was living away. I was in the US. I mean, to a certain extent, my family had already opened up to Daryl, and when I was contacted, it was a surprise, but it was also exciting because of that full blood connection. You know, because Mum died when I was 5 and my brother was 3, and so that full blood connection was the most exciting thing for me.
Daryl, you were the eldest child and the only one to be adopted out. Did you find out why?
The story is obviously hard to navigate because my mother had passed away. I kind of got various pieces along the way through the decades. I think there was a lot of pressure on Beverly by her mother Dorothy to give me away. I think there was a story that Dorothy believed that Beverly was raped by her cousin. That story, of course, wasn't true, but yeah, so that's how I ended up on that route.
What is it like hanging out with your family when you haven't shared a childhood?
It's pretty hard because there's this thing called hypervigilance, and a lot of adoptees have it, and it's like you have to test the room all the time to see where you fit in. So the way that my siblings connected, how they talked, the little body language nuances and things like that was hard for me to pick up initially, but I always thought I wanted to be part of it. That loss of that childhood also brings a lot of gaps. I think now we're better at it, but initially it was kind of hard. I felt like I wasn't an outsider, but I kind of felt like an outsider not trying to intrude.
Catherine, what has meeting Daryl meant for the family?
I think we're just really lucky, actually. Daryl has made deliberate efforts to cultivate relationships with each of us, and we're really lucky that he's done that. And it serves as a reminder of how much effort we actually should make and not just take other family members for granted, to be honest.
Amy, 3 years ago you learnt that you were donor conceived. Your donor father Sig is joining us from Melbourne because he's just recovering from COVID. When you're together, what's it like?
When we're physically in the same room, I feel this incredibly strong energy from Sig, and at times it can get very overwhelming, but it's just a really strong connection that I do feel, and it's just an energy, and it's amazing.
Sig, what has meeting Amy been like for you?
Oh, it's been totally incredible. I'll never forget the first time I met her, and it was in a restaurant in Melbourne, and she walked in, and I was a bit nervous, a little bit apprehensive, and wow, it's just so incredible. I mean, this woman is my daughter, I kept thinking.
You donated sperm in the 1970s. Did you expect the process to be anonymous?
Yes, we were told clearly it was a very confidential arrangement, and I got on with my life. And to be honest, over the decades, I'd forgotten I'd even done it. So,
Amy wasn't the first of your donor-conceived children that you met. Another child, Elena, reached out to you first. What did you think when you saw a message from her?
I thought, out of the blue message on Facebook, I thought, it could have been a scam. So I put Elena off a little bit, but meeting up with her eventually was just the most amazing. She was the first one of my 3 children, donor children that I've met. It was just one of the most beautiful experiences.
Elena, how did you find Sig?
The first thing I did was approach the clinic where I was conceived in Melbourne, and they were able to provide some non-identifying information about my donor. This was all before the law changed in Victoria, which allowed us to apply for identifying information and potential contact. First, they supplied me with the non-identifying information, which was that he was American, possibly a teacher, that there was another boy and girl that resulted from his donations from different families. So being an only child, that was pretty exciting to know that there was a brother and sister out there. Then a little bit further down the track, I decided to do an ancestry DNA test, and through some sort of close matches, which I was able to figure out were on my father's side because they were American, I was able to figure out who he was.
You also got a message from your brother through a DNA website.
Yeah.
What was it like to learn you had a brother?
Yeah, I was really excited to get a new match on Ancestry. The message from him was, well, hello, Elena, this could be quite the can of worms.
Oh. Sig, you weren't a father until 3 adults came into your life. What's it like now to have 3 adult children?
Well, you have to imagine it's a pretty steep learning curve. I'm not a parent myself, and to have 3 adult children aged 40 and now a few years after that is just amazing. So, and to sort of go through, become part of their lives a bit. I'm not taking over their family at all, but it's just it's such an incredible interest and such an incredible love and companionship with all of them.
Jamie, you were born in Vietnam and adopted by an Adelaide family. You met your birth mum and your siblings just a few days ago in person for the first time. You've also met some of your birth father's relatives. What impact have these reunions had on you?
It gives me a sense of identity, who I am, and you know, my place in the world.
Well, since 1990, it's estimated that more than 7,000 Australians have been adopted from overseas. Here's Rachel's story.
For most of my life, I have not felt Korean. I look it, but I don't feel it. My name is Rachel Sibley. I was adopted from Seoul, South Korea, when I was 4 months old into a very loving Australian family. I grew up with 2 brothers and a sister. I was the youngest. My relationship with my adoptive family is really strong. I miss them so much now that I've moved to Sydney.
Hello! Hi, Dad.
In my early 20s, I experienced, I guess what you could call an identity crisis. I'd experienced a bit more racism towards me. People were kind of coming down on me for looking Asian, so that kind of made me think about my position in society and my position in this world.
That's the letter that my parents got to say that I'd been placed to them for adoption.
The main reasons for trying to search for my birth mother was I had a few health problems come up, which then made me wonder about whether there is any hereditary type problems. Also, I wanted to make sure she was okay. So the first time I reached out to my birth mother, she politely declined. She didn't want to meet me because there weren't many people that knew about her having me. Yeah, it was disappointing, but I was also prepared for it. Being rejected is something that anyone that's been adopted has had to deal with quite a bit in their life. But then something changed. I was given this amazing opportunity to travel back to South Korea in 2011. I ended up getting an email saying that she wanted to meet me. I just remember walking in through that door and can't even describe the emotion when you meet your birth mum for the first time. I'm about to start crying. When I met her, there was so much happiness. There was quite a bit of sadness, and surprisingly, there was quite a bit of anger. Why did she do this? Why did she give me up for adoption? You know, just why? What I found out from my birth mother was that she had also experienced similar health problems, which was quite handy to know. The last time I spoke to my birth mother would have been 2015. That chapter's closed. I have started to search for my birth father, making sure that he's okay and that he's alive, and to close that last chapter off, I think.
Jane, you're a social worker and you help people track down their birth families and counsel them through the reunion process. Is there a typical time when people want to meet and try and find their birth families?
Adoption is lifelong, so it comes up at different points throughout people's lives for the adopted person, often at those really big moments of identity. So firstly in adolescence, then meeting their life partner, when their parents die, when big things happen, then it comes up for them again. It's never really life-threatening, but it's always there. It sits with them throughout every event, it's because it's part of who they are, and it's something that often that they can't describe. And for mothers, of course, it's that birthday. It's that first time that they had that baby and then they lost that baby.
Elise, you were adopted as a baby. What motivated you to decide to try and find your birth family?
I always knew I was adopted, and I grew up in a very loving family. I had wonderful parents. But as a teenager, I too questioned, where do I belong? I became quite rebellious and I demanded answers. Of course, the law didn't allow me to have these answers, and I became quite difficult to my parents. And from there, I sort of had to let it go because I didn't have any answers. And then later on, when the law changed and I had my own daughter, I thought, this is so important. I've got no medical background. I've got no anything. Let's apply for my certificate. And from then on, I got my certificate.
What did your birth certificate reveal?
My birth certificate revealed that my biological parents were married and there was 6 siblings born before me.
So were you expecting your story to be different?
I was expecting either that my biological mother had died during birth, which is a story I'd sort of been led to believe as a child. I never in my wildest dream thought they were married and had other children.
Did you want to meet your birth parents?
No, initially I was so overwhelmed by it, and initially I was like, oh no, I don't want to meet them. But I wanted to meet the siblings. And the social worker said to me, well, this might be very hard. They might not even know you exist. So I just sort of went home with the details of this is what's happened, and was sort of left to deal with it, which was quite difficult.
Did you end up meeting your siblings?
I did. I went through the phone book and I figured, okay, brothers wouldn't have changed their name, and one of my biological brothers was 14 years old when I was born, and I contacted him and just said to him, look, I think I might be related to you. And his reply was he knew straight away who I was. I was the baby that died.
So they'd been told that you died?
Yeah, they'd been told that I died, yeah, so...
You then decided to meet your birth mother.
Yep.
What was that like?
It was very challenging. I wanted sort of answers, and I went in and I said to her, what would you like me to call you? And she said, you can call me Mum. And I said to her, no, I can never call you Mum. I've got a mum. So she said I could call her by her Christian name, which is what I did.
Did she ever tell you why she gave you up for adoption?
She told me that my biological father was a womaniser. He was off with other women, and he said to her he wasn't coming back, and she said, well, if you're not coming back, I'm not going to keep this child, and that she gave me up to spite him, because he did come back.
How did you feel when she said that?
That just totally threw me. I was just like, where is my place in this world? It really upset me. I couldn't really continue much of a relationship with her after that, unfortunately.
Why did you not want to continue that relationship?
I just found it was just too hard and just too confronting for me. I felt rejected, unwanted, a whole range of emotions.
Did you ever speak to her again?
I did. There was a couple of phone conversations afterwards, and a biological sister had let me know she was unwell and was dying, and I did ring her then. I also attended her funeral because, I mean, she gave birth to me, and without her, I wouldn't be here.
What do you think about meeting your biological family later in life?
I think, well, obviously because of how I found out what I found out. And it wasn't, you know, sometimes you see on these TV shows, you know, people meet and it's all hugs and kisses, and it just wasn't like that. You've got to take time for any relationship. It's like me walking in here and walking up to everybody and hugging them because they've got a similar story. Like, it doesn't...
We do that at the end of every show, by the way.
It doesn't really work like that. Like, for me, it didn't anyhow. I just felt, you know, it had to take time. I found out 35 years ago, so it's taken a long time to come to terms with and also to develop a relationship with some of these siblings. Some of them I've never met.
Elise, you were adopted at birth and a few years ago decided to try and find your birth mother. What was the reaction from your adoptive parents?
They have always been very supportive. When I did my ancestry DNA and I did get a match, I immediately told my adoptive mother, and it was pure excitement and pure joy. It was always very positive and such a good experience for me personally.
Last year you tracked down your birth mother through a DNA website. Yep. How did your adoptive mother react?
It was very positive until I think when the meetings happened and she saw how quickly we bonded and how well we got along and how much love happened so quickly. I felt a little bit of a drawback, but it's very understandable. I think she was worried that I was going to forget my whole life with her and move on with this new family.
When you started texting and meeting up with your birth mother, did you feel like you could tell your adoptive mum about that?
I did. I was very open and honest. I was, you know, showing her I'm not going to leave you, but I think I shared too much and it kind of went in a direction that wasn't what I was hoping.
Jenny, you're Elise's adoptive mum. How did you feel when Elise decided to try and find her birth mother?
I was excited and I was actually relieved because I wanted her to have that opportunity before it was too late. I had so many fears. What if the person had passed away? Or what if she has a rejection and I'm not there to comfort her? All these fears as an adoptive mother for her.
When it actually happened, was the reality a bit different?
It was actually, and I was actually shocked at my own reaction because I was so excited for her. But then I just got this fear in me. What if then she'll forget about us? Which is not what I would thought I would be like. But it happened, unfortunately.
How do you feel about Elise's relationship with her birth mother now?
I just wanted her to be happy, and we needed that piece of puzzle that was missing in her life to see her happy and content.
Amy, how did your parents react when you told them about meeting your donor father and half-siblings?
So because I found out I was donor conceived through the government agency, I then had to tell them that I knew this information before I even told them that I was meeting them. It was an incredible shock to them that I had been told by someone else. They had been told in the 70s that it was an anonymous process. After the shock wore off, they have been supportive of my search to connect with my new biological family. It's a big thing for them to talk about it now, and they're still coming to terms with it, but they are supporting me, and we still have a close relationship.
Annette, what was it like for your adoptive parents when you met your birth mother, Carol?
Mum and Dad were amazingly supportive, and they'd always said, Annette, if you ever want to go and search, we'll be 100% behind you. But I don't know if they ever actually really expected it to happen.
Right.
And I can remember Dad saying to me not long after I met Carol, he said, when we picked you up from Crown Street Hospital in 1967, we were told these files would never be opened. But they met Carol many times, and we all had a great relationship together. And in fact, a really special thing, when my mother was dying, when Mum was dying, I was living in the States, and I was on a flight on the way back to Australia. I didn't make it in time, but the person who was with Mum when she died was Carol.
Really?
And Mum said to Carol, you look after Annette. You look after Annette for me.
How did it feel having that message from your mum said to you kind of directly through Carol?
To me, it just showed that trust between the two of them and that connection. And I've been very lucky to have two wonderful mothers in my life. And, it's just I've been very, very lucky.
Elise, did meeting your birth mum impact your adoptive family?
No, I never really told them that I had discovered things. I talked about it with my brother when I got my birth certificate, and I was under the understanding that, Dad had had various conversations with other members of the family when I was 15 and kicking up a fuss, and I think my dad knew some of the story, and I think he thought it would be too overwhelming for me, especially at 15. He was correct. And he said if she ever wants to find out, that's okay, but I don't want to know about it. So I never told them that I had found anything out.
Jamie, you haven't found your birth father yet. Will you continue to search for him?
Yeah, when I was in my 20s, I made myself a promise that when I take my last breath, I would have turned every stone to find my family, and so I'm still turning stones.
Caron, you were abandoned as a baby and left on the steps of a regional health centre in New South Wales. You discovered your father had died but continued searching for your mother. Did you get anywhere with that?
I have family that is linked to her, and I actually was approached by the television show Every Family Has a Secret, and they were looking into it for a couple of years, and through the genealogy evidence that we already had, they approached one of two sisters who we believe it is between, and that one sister was someone who had a 2-year relationship with my father, and they spoke with her, the producers spoke with her for a couple of hours, and she was very convincing in the fact that she was not my mother, and they suggested it was her sister, and she said that no, it was impossible for it to be her sister because she was disabled in some way. So the producers said, oh, we can't go ahead with that story and help you with that because we're being told by our specialists that this is such a deep secret with my mother that it's probably something that she'll deny forever.
Right.
I could open up the cold case because the police never did find those two parents, and so I had been informed by the police that I could look into looking at that, and they could approach maybe getting a DNA test, or I could
knock on the door, but it's not my kind of thing to kind of knock up on someone's door and go, hi, might be your daughter. So it really has become an issue for me because it's a dead stop of where do I go now, and keep it friendly, keep it safe, keep it, because, I don't want to hurt someone that's kept such a secret. And yeah, I want to know, I would really like to know, don't get me wrong.
Do you think you'll ever give up looking?
No, I won't, because that's such a part of my story. It's like, why did I end up on a street, on a step? It's two blocks from the hospital. It's a lot of unanswered questions. It's been terrorising me my whole life, from finding out that, I wasn't in my family at birth, to not fitting in with the foster family I was in, to not really getting on in that hierarchy of different family members, to, it's just identity. I don't know my identity, and DNA makes you call for it. Yeah. Somehow, teenager year, being a parent or whatever, it's calling you, and you just got to find it. You've got to search.
Thank you so much. Thank you to you all for sharing your stories in the room tonight. It's wonderful, and to have conversations about where we belong in the world and identity. It's what we're all made of. So thank you so much for being so open. Thank you for watching.